We asked you what your most common struggles were on our Instagram and on the Discord, and almost all of you said that it was arrangement and finishing tunes. So I decided that it would be a really good idea to put together years of experience that have enabled me to finish hundreds and release hundreds of tunes across multiple record labels. So what I want to do, I'm not going to be able to wave a magic wand and have you finishing absolutely everything that you start, but there's some principles that I use when I'm finishing tracks that I'm pretty confident that if you apply into your own productions, you're going to start to see a big difference. But first, I think we need to have a look at what warrants a complete track and what makes a track finished. Then we're going to look at some rules that you can maybe apply when producing. And then I'm going to show you some stuff in context and how you might get out the loop, arrange your tunes and fill them out so we get that last 10 to 15% so you can finally start finishing your tracks. So let's dive in and make a start. So I think before we get started discussing how to finish tracks and tips for finishing tracks, I think it's important for us to just have a conversation about what a finished track looks like. And this will be different for many people. There's not really any hard and fast rules here. It's all subjective, we all have different opinions of whether the track's finished or not. But I think there's definitely some rules that I would say when I'm producing, my tracks need to actually tick all of these things in order for me to say, right, that's ready to be part of a release or that's ready to be sent to a label. So here's a list of some of the things that I would say are important if we're going to finish tracks. So we need a solid initial idea. Without this, the track's not finished. So there's no point in just like having an idea that you're not in love with or an idea that's not going to work. Because if that's not, if you haven't got that, we're never going to be able to finish a track. But we'll talk about this a little bit later because you can actually detach yourself from this a little bit and you can get obsessive over the high expectations, but we'll cover that. The second point is the track interesting for the duration of the tune? So like we might have 6 minutes, we might have 4 minutes, but can you listen to that track from start to finish without losing interest, and put yourself in the position of somebody on a dance floor? If your track is losing people's interest, it's not going to get played. It's not essentially going to do its job, which is to move people. We need the track to be interesting for the duration. So there needs to be enough changes and enough development in that arrangement for it to be interesting. Third, now this doesn't apply to all tunes, of course, but if we're talking about club music, which in most cases we are, is it functional for DJs? Has it got an intro and outro? Is the tempo in the right sort of area for the genre? Is it functional? Does it make people dance? Has it got groove? If you make it ambient, this is slightly different, but for the most part, it needs to be functional. Does it sound full and complete? So by that, I mean, is there enough elements in there for the track to sound finished? So do we have enough drums going on? Do we have enough synths or mid-range elements going on? In terms of thinking about the frequency spectrum, is there enough there to make it sound full and complete? Then the next point is it mixed down to a good standard? Now this is a whole other thing in itself, but if I had a checklist for what makes a track finished, the mix down has to be in there. And then the last point, and arguably the most important, is that no aspects of the track are sounding empty or dull, because that to me means that it's not finished. So there's some of my tips, like checklists, that I would go through whenever a track is, going to be around the point of finishing. So some essential points then to consider if we are finishing tunes. And the most important thing I think is don't overthink it. And this links into the next point. Your standards could be too high. What are you comparing yourself to? If you make minimal and you're comparing yourself to Villa Lobos, then realistically, that's not going to be the highest standard that you should be aiming for. It's not going to be possible in the interim. You can aim and have those sights high, of course, but if your standards are too high, you're never going to finish anything. And we're going to look at some quotes from a book that I've been reading that I think will be useful. But don't overthink it. And the only way to get good at finishing tunes is by finishing tunes. So if your standards are high and you never finish anything because it's not good enough, then you're never going to get good at finishing tunes. So just get into the process and into the habit, because a lot of it is habit and a lot of it is psychological. So the only way to get good is by finishing tunes. So try and finish as many as possible. One of the most key things to me, and this is said a lot, I've read books that have stated this. I've spoken to other DJs and producers who have said that this is the case for them as well. Get as much of the writing process done in the first session as possible, because you're in a creative mindset. You're welcoming in the creativity in that environment, in that particular moment. And we can all be creative. There's no such thing as somebody who isn't creative or someone who is creative. It's not a talent. It's something that we welcome in, and it can happen sometimes and sometimes it can't. All we can do is set the conditions to allow that to happen. So if I'm in an environment where I'm writing a tune and things are going well and the ideas are flowing, I need to get as much done in that first session as possible. And then I'll come back and edit later and do those finishing touches and do the technical stuff. So in that first session, if I wanted to finish tunes, I would get as much down as possible while that creative flow and all those creative juices are flowing. The next point, keep it simple. Think about your favorite tracks, and I'm pretty sure that they're so simple. You know, the core ideas, as we mentioned before, as long as they're good, so you have a solid foundation. Usually that's the drums, so good kick drums, claps, like a nice bit of groove, bass line, and some synths. That's it. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to overproduce it. You know, less is more in almost all circumstances. Even if you're not making minimal music, think about, like, basically the human brain can only focus on, I think, 3 or 4 audible elements at once. If you've got 8 different patterns and 8 different things, the brain isn't going to be able to focus on all of that. So think about drums, bass, synths. Have that as your foundation. And that's something that people are going to be able to concentrate on, because too much going on is just going to be, overproduced. And then a couple of things that link to each other at the bottom is, like, there isn't a set formula. So I'm giving you my tools or my sort of checklists and ideas, but ultimately yours might be very different, and you may just take these and adapt them. Don't take everything that I'm saying here as gospel. It's just an idea. It's just a way for you to think and get outside of this mindset of thinking that you can't finish tunes, because it is a skill, but ultimately you can learn that by doing. And sometimes it really doesn't need much to be finished. So recently I put an EP out on Bandcamp, and most of those tracks were made in, like a session of 2 to 3 hours. Really didn't overthink it, kept the arrangement simple, had it flipping so it was interesting, but really they're quite minimal tunes, there's not loads going on. So sometimes it really doesn't need much to be finished. So that's something to consider. And then I wanted to look at some quotes from an amazing Rick Rubin book that I've been reading called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And really, if you're struggling for creativity or you're struggling to finish music, then this is an absolute must read. So one of the chapters that I read recently, and I sort of highlighted this because I thought it'd be excellent to include in this video, because there's a lot of these points that really sort of would, if you are having any of these thoughts and these habits, then this could be the reason that you're not finishing music. And whilst it's easier said than done to just stop doing this, if you're aware of it, you can maybe put things in place to stop it from happening. So if you believe that you're not good enough or your tracks are not good enough, you are not going to be finishing tracks. If you feel like you don't have the energy that it takes, you maybe have lost a love for it, so you're not going to be finishing tracks. So adopted rules is absolute truth. So you taking what I'm telling you here as absolute truth is going to restrict you. If you're not wanting to do the work and you're feeling a bit lazy with it, then you're not going to finish tunes. Ultimately, finishing tunes can be effort. It's not always going to be fun. The writing process for me is the most fun part. But like when I'm getting into mixing down a tune and arranging a tune, I hate it sometimes. But ultimately, you have to do the work in order to finish tracks. So what might feel unpleasant, you break through the barrier, you do the work, and you just try and break out of that laziness cycle. Then you're going to actually produce good work, and you're going to start finishing tracks, because it's not easy. And then there's the other option of like not taking the work to its highest expression. So if you just think, oh, that track's wicked, I've finished that, and just fire it out the door straight away, and you're not really taking the time to listen to it properly and think about how you could improve it, you're not getting feedback from other people and coming back and adding things in. So there's a balance between doing enough and not doing enough. So just thinking about that and taking it to its highest possible point is a really good thing to think about. And then there's having certain goals so ambitious that you can't even begin. Like if you are thinking that you're just going to make an absolute anthem and you're not going to settle for anything less, you're not, your goals are too ambitious, and that's why you're not finishing tracks, because your standards are too high. And then there's a few other ones here which are potentially restricting you. So if you're thinking that you can only do your best work in certain conditions, that is a thought that I had for a while. So I thought I had to be in the studio to write music, or I have to have been out on the weekend and had an experience on a dance floor to be inspired to write music. I have to, some people, or maybe me in the past, have to use alcohol, have to use drugs for inspiration, whatever. That is not true. I've realised that, I can have clean living and I can be, running every day and I can be healthy and I can still actually make great music. And in some cases, that's better. So thinking you can only do your best work in certain conditions, if like it's a certain time of day, if I've made some wicked tunes at the kitchen table on my laptop with a pair of headphones. I've made stuff on a train. One of the tunes from a Breakthrough EP, I started the loop on a train. I've made stuff in bed when I've been laid in bed and they've been released. This is just thinking outside the box and not restricting yourself. This is more about creativity than finishing tunes, but it still applies. And then requiring specific tools or equipment, that kind of goes into what I was saying. You don't need to be in your studio. And then abandoning a project as soon as it gets difficult, which does apply to finishing tunes. If it's tough and you think, I can't work out how to get out of this, I've got this loop, I really like it, it's going to be difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. If you abandon it as soon as it gets difficult, then you're never going to finish anything. You're never going to achieve anything. So break out of that cycle, be disciplined, and start to actually get the stuff finished. Work through the difficult times. And then it continues into here. So feeling like you need permission to start or move forward. No, just crack on with it. Letting a perceived need for funding, equipment or support get in the way. You've got enough out there to do stuff for free. As long as you have a computer, you're pretty much good to go. Having too many ideas and not knowing where to start, never finishing projects, blaming circumstances or other people for interfering with your processes. These are excuses. And then romanticizing negative behaviors or addictions. So if you're saying, I need to drink or I need to smoke weed to make tunes, it's just eventually, you're going to realize that you're just welcoming in these behaviors when they don't necessarily need to be there, and you can just crack on and get things finished. Believing a certain mood or state is necessary to do your best work. You might need a struggle in life, or, you need to be relaxed, or I've come into the studio really pissed off and I've made some good tunes. I've come into the studio in a great mood and I've made some great tunes. Doesn't matter, just get in there and do it. And I think that when you get these ideas in your head, it kind of can have a negative effect. Distractibility and procrastination. Right now, my phone's in do not disturb mode, so I will not get any notifications. Lock your phone away, do whatever you need to do to get rid of those procrastination and distractibility, because that will stop you from finishing tunes ultimately. Impatience, it takes time, and then thinking that anything that's out of your control is in your way. So these are some really good points to consider. So the next thing that I want to do, rather than me just going in and just giving you some tips and advice, I actually want to move on from some of this theory that we've discussed, and I want to look at how we put that into practice so that it's actually something that you can apply straight away into your music. So I've got 5 tips here that we're going to look at in context that will help you get your tracks finished. So we're going to look at how to get out of the loop, how to fill out your tracks with effects and textures and transitions. We're going to look at how to recycle an element into something new. We're going to look at some quick arrangement tips, and then just to finish off, we're going to look at how we can use a reference track. So let's dive into Ableton. Let's make a start. So the first tip is, how do we get out of the loop? So a lot of you have said that you struggle to do this. So you might have a really good 8-bar loop, or you're happy with that loop, but then you really struggle to get out of it. So here's how I would get out of this loop. So first of all, let me play you the loop that I've got. It's a simple 8-bar loop. So where do we go from there though? We've got 8 bars. What can we do in order to get out of this particular loop? So there's a few things. Basically, everything's all happening here. The first thing I would say is, let's just colour this last phrase here And let's add in a few little notes, so that could be a little bit of a bass fill that keeps things interesting. It doesn't have to happen as frequently as that. Let's just see what we could do up towards the end. And we're going to push up the velocities a little bit there as well. There you go. So you've got to start from the beginning. And then I think what we need is like another element. So this could be quite hard to do, but I'm thinking we need a synth in there. So in the most simple way, I'm just going to go into, it could be any synth that I've got, but I think I've got a particular sound in mind. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to go into one of my recent sample packs in here, perhaps go into this 90s Legends one, and then this synthetic one here where we've got these one-shot sounds. So something like this might work nice. So I'm going to just double click that on the MIDI channel. That sounds quite nice. I'm also going to apply a little bit of delay on it. None of this stuff really matters too much at the moment, but this is just how I'd get out of the loop. So we might have that initial first bar. So straight away, when we just duplicate them, we're into a 16-bar loop. But I want something to happen here so that for that second 8 bars, something new is being introduced. So let's just do that, shall we? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to copy over the scaler. Now I've got to get creative and I've got to come up with another part. So I'm just going to loop this section. Needs to be a little bit louder, that. So I'm just going to push up the volume here. Also, we'll get a utility here. We'll do it on the sample here. Okay, right, let's just record something in. So I'm going to go with something like that. We can tweak it afterwards, but yeah, I'm just getting ideas down, just getting out of the loop. I like that last phrase the best, so. Let's just record that in again. There we go. So we've got a second part which we're going to use. So we need to copy that over there like that. And there we go. We've got a nice little phrase that is definitely usable. So let's copy that there like that. And then we're going to just join those clips and we're going to just and then basically what we could then do is have like, so you're always chopping and changing different sections. So here you might have like something as simple as some percussion coming in. And you'll see where I'm going with all of this. It might seem a little bit all over the place at the moment, but you'll see where
it's going. So we're going here, and let's maybe get some... something like that might work nice. Just a little bit of percussion on there, and maybe just we'll go with some like standard percussion as well. So maybe we get something from DX200 drums. Yeah, something like this might work as well. Just little percussion bits, and that becomes like a bit of a rim shot or something like that. But then it's a... yeah, that's a nice little groove. And then this might then be like a breakdown. And we might just try that in there. And you're slowly building out of that loop. So like in this section, it looks like it's a little bit bare. So what I might try and do in there is like maybe try, let's go into just a random sample pack in here, and let's maybe look at how we could get some Rhodes in there or something from maybe this Sweely one. Where is it? So there's some nice one-shot Rhodes samples. So yeah. Let's try putting that in a sampler, and then like let's try maybe yeah, something like that could work. Some delay on it, something. So tidy the plane up a little bit there. Extend that. Extend these out because they're quite short. Yeah, cool. All right, so yeah, and you're just building little sections like this, really, and there's no rules to it. So this is just getting out the loop. So I'm going to just put a little bit of delay on this as well, and we'll hear that what we've gone from is just a simple 8-bar loop into something a lot more interesting that has changes. So I've just done that really quickly. I mean, I'm not massively sold on the idea, but you get the point. You know, you take a lot more time with it with your sound selection. I'm just showing you for the purpose of it, but this is how we'd go about getting out of the loop. So my second tip is a really important one, and it's about filling out your track with effects, textures, and transitions and things like that. Because as we looked at before, it's really easy to get those drums and the bass sounding good like this. So I've just soloed, this is a track from mine that's coming on Pilot, so I thought it'd be a good example to show. So that's basically a really simple loop. So let's just add in the vocal. It's a bit more interesting now, but ultimately if we just had that all the way through the track. It's interesting, but it's really lacking depth. So let's just add some Rhodes in there. Now we're getting somewhere. So we've got two different phrases, but we've also got these little transitions. So here like this, where we've got just a crash happening. We've got this transition here that's slightly different without the crash, but and then here. But it still sounds empty. So what we can add in is these little, so we've got these Rhodes in there, we've got these effects. So things like this, which on their own don't sound like a lot. This little Vox hit, like these little whisper vocals, this little alarm thing, this little reverse stab, like this white noise here, this little Vox stab. And all of these are the last sort of 20% of the tune. So once you've got your main layers there, like your kick, your bass, your hi-hat, you sort of also you started singing there really, but these are the last few bits. Like these little. So with everything else, oh, just filling out the space. So we've got that vocal in there. So adding those little layers in are absolutely crucial to filling out your tune. So what we'll do is we'll just take this loop from this track and we will just test, we'll call it. We will just strip everything right back. So let's just delete all of these channels and let's just go for something really simple in here. And let's take it, let's just focus actually on just this one section. So when we need the bass line. I deleted the bass line by accident. I didn't mean to do that. So let's go back in here. Let's keep the bass line in, but let's take all of those extra elements out that are those last few sprinkles to fill things out. So we've got a sync loop, but we need to now think about how we're going to progress it. So the first thing I do is I go into my sample library and I just type in effects like this. And then I've got these things. So let's just keep that loop in and we'll just have a flick through. That's quite nice. So something like this would work towards the end of the bar perhaps. Let's just see how we can get it to fit with the groove. So I'm going to get the start point at the beginning like that, and that could maybe be something that we have in this as a little transition. There you go, bosh. Straight away you've got this little transition. We take the kick out and we drop back into another little section here. So this is how it sounds. And that one as well could work towards the end for a little bit of variation. So again, we start at the beginning. Yeah, sick. But we need to fill that out. So again, we can look to get things from stuff like that. It's great just for filling out space. These little things, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just showing you really quickly how you can do it. And obviously you can create these samples yourself. And then you'd have like little, maybe try Vox like this. Something like that. Yes, even that works. It sounds weird because it's a tune of mine that I'm just basically just rewriting, but this is, yeah, you can start to see how everything fits together. And you have like a vocal in there or something. But like, these are the little details that will make your track sound full and complete. So filling out your track with effects, textures, little transitions where you're doing fills and things like that are a really good way to finish tunes. So if you're struggling to come up with some additional elements for your track, you can sometimes recycle some of the elements that are already in there. So a classic thing to do is to just take the bass notes and add those to a new instrument, maybe shuffle the notes along or something. But I've shown that quite a few times in some of my videos. That's a really good technique. So you just duplicate this channel, you'd put a new instrument on here, and you'd maybe just move the notes along and pitch it up or something like that. So you can get some really good results from that. But that's super easy. But what else you can do? Let's say, for example, we've got this vocal. We can take what we've got there and we could actually think about processing it and creating new elements or new layers with using what we've already got in the project. So this is called resampling, but there's, in the most simple sense, what we could do is we could literally just resample it. So we could take that audio sample that we got there, this vocal, drag it into a drum rack, and then
move back.
We could just shorten it.
Move.
But like, it might sound better with this second phrase.
Back.
And then we could just like trigger it with MIDI and then sort of think about how we process it.
Back.
Get the swing on it.
Back.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily interesting at the moment, but I've started using this plugin called Sigmund. So that's another example of this is another example of how we could do something creative with it. So let's just say we've got that. So let's go into the presets and let's try just playing with it. So you've already got this like different element, this different layer that you could use. And then you could sort of filter that in and out like this. And then you can just do all sorts of different things with it. That's one example. You could run it through Tantra. You could just filter it and yeah, crazy stuff with it. But also then there's other things you can do with it. Like again, we'll put it on its own channel.
Move back.
We could turn it into a completely different instrument using something like Reactor effects. In here, there's some really cool bits that you can use that just completely warp a sound. Tornado is another really good one. But let's just go in here. Let's have a look at is it Prism Effects maybe? It's in the factory library. We've got like, there's lots of really cool like sequenced samplers and things like that that you can get. But yeah, even in here, it's just like.
Move back.
It's just really, really strange things that you can get from it. But yeah, it's definitely worth experimenting with lots of different plugins anyway to recycle the stuff that you've already got in the project. So for the fourth tip, I want to show you just some really simple tips that you can use and in your arrangement, basically. So the first one that we want to look at is simplifying your bass line in the intro so that you've got somewhere else to go. So that could be as simple as just taking out certain notes. So this is the main bass line. So in this instance, this one's slightly different. So we've got, we're missing that first note, which is in here, but we could even simplify it even more. We could just take out loads of notes so that it's just. So. And then we've got somewhere to go in this one. And then extra elements come in laid over the top. So taking out notes and having a simplified version of your bass line in the intro and the outro is one way that you can have a bit more, a few changes in your track, and it helps to finish tunes when you think of it like this. If you just back yourself into a corner, then you haven't really got anywhere to go. Whilst we're on the subject of bass lines, another really cool trick is having more than one bass line in your tune. So this, for example, is the second bass line. So having a second bass line in the tune means it can keep it interesting in later on in the tune, and you're not just having too much repetition. So yeah, that really works. Then secondly, you can also think about pitching up your bass lines so that they're higher in octave. So a little transition like that, where you're going up a key or going up an octave, can be really useful to just creating a bit more tension, having a bit of variation. Then there's different sections where it's a little bit like a breakdown, but you're just taking the bass line out completely. Whilst you introduce another element, like this, for example. And then when the bass line comes in, it has more impact. And there we have the third bass line of the tune, so there's no limit to how many you can have. But interestingly, in this project as well, there's a few other little arrangement techniques, such as resampling the certain parts. So that is the original. We then resampled this tune. It's a track of mine and Wickham's, which is coming out on Thirst. Then we resampled it with more heavier processing. And like here. So we put a delay on it with loads of feedback and then recorded it in as audio. So we've got these extra layers. We did the same with the vocal. So the original vocal, I believe, is this. Oh. And it just keeps looping like that. And these just go on throughout the tune. There's some more here. That's reversed. So yeah, those little details are just for resampling. So it's kind of a combination of some of the things we've spoken about. So yeah, let's move on to the final tip. So the fifth and final tip is actually using a reference track. And that's not just using a reference track to copy elements or to copy the arrangement. It's just having a track that we respect in a similar style, or that we think is a full, complete track that sounds like how we want our track to sound like. And it's listening to it, not necessarily for the ideas in it, but the instruments and how and what's in it, like sonically. So take a listen to a reference track and then listen to your track, A and B it, and think, right, what instruments are missing? Is there an acid line in that track, for example? Maybe there's an acid line in mine. Think about the frequencies that are missing. Think about the elements that are missing from yours that are in the reference track. So reference tracks are a really good way to go.
So hopefully this has been useful. What are your ways of getting out the loop and your ways of finishing tracks? Let us know if anything here resonates with you or if it's been useful. And if you want more content like this, then do let me know in the Discord. Thanks for watching.